So now that we have a thorough understanding of our tools and materials for watercolor, it's time to put our brushes to paper and learn about brush strokes. So we're going to be talking about mark making, and I'd like to show you several techniques with both round brushes and a flat brush to get you going, and you can practice these at home and really get a good feel for all of the different ways we can use our brushes. At the end, we'll also do an exercise that will help you practice this and get even better at it. So the round brush in watercolor is really my workhorse brush. It's probably the most common brush that you'll see used in watercolor. And I'm going to show you many different ways that you can use it here. The most important thing to remember when we're using a round brush is the pressure that we're putting on the brush. If I'm just picking up some paint and moving across the page and I'm just putting pressure down, you can see that, I can cover a page with a round brush. I can use it for washes. I can cover a lot of ground with a round brush. But that's not really its shining point. So I want to show you with a round brush, even one this thick, okay, with a nice thick belly and that nice fine point, I can get really, really thin lines. And then by just putting some pressure down, I can get really thick. And then I can lift up and put lighter pressure on it and go back to those really thin lines. This is a super helpful thing. I'm going to show you one more time. And notice how I'm sort of anchoring my hand on the paper. Really, really light pressure, a little bit more pressure, a little bit less pressure, and then I can go back to a super fine line. Okay? So that is kind of a push-pull, thin to thick, back to thin. Round brushes are super at that. It is really difficult to do this with a flat brush. So this is something that a round brush will do for you. Another thing that you can do is a really, really fine line to outline something, to make patterns on something. Let's say you're painting a still life and you want to put pattern on wallpaper or on a couch or something. A round brush is like a pencil, so you can draw with it. So sometimes I like to just practice even writing my name, writing out letters, writing different shapes, just to understand that I can pretty much draw with a round brush just like I would with a pencil. So what are some of these good for? Well, obviously this is great for putting washes in, like a sky or something like this, or a background, filling in large areas. Something like this is great for, let's say, flower petals. So if I were going to paint like a daisy, I could start in the center, push, and lift up. And I can get these really nice instant kind of petal shapes. All right, I'm running out of paint. That I would have to do more painstakingly another way. So the other way I could do it is actually to draw the shape and to fill it in, okay? But it's sort of much more natural just to do it like this. Another way is to make kind of an undulating wave pattern. You can twist your round brush and you just put a little bit of pressure on, twist it, and then twist it back. And you can get some really nice, loose, expressive lines that way that don't look forced. So if you're doing a painting where you want it to be a little bit more fanciful and loose, you can let go of some of that pressure and just use twisting movements, and you can get a really nice undulating line that way. So you can practice that as well. I really want to emphasize when I'm using a round brush, it's all about pressure. I can use the very tip of my brush and make the finest lines you can imagine with this great big brush. Really, really light pressure is going to give me a very, very fine line, okay? If I put a lot of pressure, I'm going to get a really thick line, and anything in between. Very versatile brush. So you can see that by varying your pressure and a little bit by varying your technique, but mostly it's about that pressure, you can get a wide variety of lines with just a round brush. So the flat brush is a great tool for many, many different mark making techniques with your watercolor paints. Flat brushes are basically exactly how they sound. They take the ferrule and they smash it down until you have basically this thin, kind of square shape of a brush. The cool thing about it is that you have an instant way to get sharp angles. So I'm going to show you some great techniques with a flat brush. The most obvious thing to me is that you can make straight lines fairly easily by putting your brush down on the paper, anchoring your hand, and moving the brush across. You have more surface touching the paper, so you can get kind of a long flat line. Think about that being really useful for maybe water techniques, things like that. It's just a great way to get a very fast, expressive straight line. But it also is a great way to get a wash. I can use a flat brush and drag it across the paper and covering a really large amount of paper at one time, and it's perfect for that. So often if I use a flat brush, that's what I would use it for, to get large areas of my paper covered. You can also use it to make small, like squares, things where you're just dragging it. You don't want to have to paint a square in, so you could just drag your brush a little bit and use it to make patterns like that, where you're just dragging the brush a small distance to get just a short block of color. Think about if you were maybe painting a window, okay? And so I could do, 6 of these down, and I would automatically have kind of like a pained window effect. So a flat brush is great for that because they're all going to be even in size, the size of the width of your bristles. You can also do kind of twisting your brush effect with a flat brush. And if you start with it going this way, and then you can just twist it a little bit and turn it and twist it and turn it, you can get kind of this ribbon effect, which is really beautiful also for watery things or certain textures that you might need when you're painting. So flat brushes are great for that too. You can do the same thing as you would kind of do with other brushes, where you can push and pull it a little bit. So I can splay these bristles out a little bit by putting a lot of pressure on it and then lifting up. So pushing down, lifting up. And so I can get different widths of line. It doesn't just have to be the width of the brush. So again, you can start with the width of the brush, put some pressure on it to get it a little bit wider, and then lift up again. So push, pull. Okay, so I'm going to get a new piece of paper and show you how to make a scalloped edge. Same kind of idea. We're pushing and pulling. We're using different pressure on our paintbrush. So I can start really thin, push down a little bit, pull up again, push down, pull up, push down, pull up. Let me do it again. Thin, push down, pull up, push down, pull up. Push down, pull up. So I can get kind of this thick to thin line without having to painstakingly paint that. There's so many different applications for a line like this, and you would, kind of adjust it to what you're painting. But it's so, so important to understand the pressure really controls your brush stroke. So I can take this brush and I can make these marks over and over again, trying to mimic what I've done before. So you can see flat brushes aren't just for washes. You can make all kinds of marks just by changing the pressure and manipulating your technique. So use these basic strokes as a starting point and experiment to see what other kinds of marks you can make with your flat brush. So no matter what brush you're using, no matter what marks you're making, you need to learn to build up some muscle memory in your hands so that your brush and your hand and your eyes and your brain all work together. And the only way to do that is by practicing. So I'm going to show you a great exercise that you can do, and I really suggest that you get your paint and brush and paper out and follow along with me. We're going to make some marks. I'm going to use a round brush first, and I've got a little dish of watercolor mixed up next to me so I don't have to keep mixing from my palette. I'm going to make sure that my brush is fully loaded with watercolor. You can pick your favorite color. And I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm going to start with a really thin line, push to a thick line, lift up to a thin line, push to a thick line. So again, it's that control of pushing and pulling. Okay, so it's kind of like this scalloped edge here. The key is that I want to repeat this down the page. So I'm going to pick up some more color in my brush. Again, I'm going to start, I'm anchoring my hand on my paper so I get more control. I'm going to start thin, and I'm going to try to mimic what I've done before. Push, pull, push, pull. Okay. Not enough pigment in my brush, so I'll try that again. Fine line, push, pull, push, pull. And it's not as easy as it looks. So you'll see, you need to do it over and over again. Fine push, pull, push, pull. So I'll do this all the way down my page. I'll do it one more time for you. Push, pull, push, pull. Okay, so you can see that I'm just trying to mimic what I've done before. All right, so in other words, what I don't want to do is I don't want to start, really thick and go thin and then thick. I want to try to mimic the line. It's never going to be perfect, but you're getting the idea that you're using certain pressures to make certain marks on your paper. All right, so you would finish this whole row, and I would probably do 2 or 3 sheets of paper like this and do it maybe weekly. It's a really good thing to get your muscle memory going. So that's a round brush. With a flat brush, we're going to do kind of the same thing. Again, you can use this with any mark making, any techniques, doesn't matter, any brush. The key is to be repetitive. So I'm taking my flat brush, I'm getting lots of pigment in it. I'm going to move my paper over just a little bit. That's another thing. Always feel free to move your paper around to make your arm more comfortable. Some of us are more comfortable with our paper at different angles. Never be afraid to move your paper around. So lots of pigment in there. And I'm going to do kind of the same thing. I'll start kind of with a light pressure and then push and then pull and then push and pull. So light pressure, push, pull, push, pull. So it's the same exact idea that I'm doing here. Light pressure, push, light pressure, push, light pressure. So I'm getting kind of the scalloped edge. And you can get a little bit of a rhythm going. Okay, so again, you want to complete this entire side of your paper or several sheets of paper if you really want to do a good job. So these are 2 things you can do with your round and flat brush. I want to show you one more exercise that might be something extra that you could do at another time. And this is great for learning how to make like the same size objects over and over again. So I'm going to take my flat brush and I'm going to start by making kind of a little square. Okay, then I can, making a little square, and then I can go straight and lift up, make a little square, straight over, lift up, make a little square. So you can see the key is to get this as even as possible, so evenly spaced. So I didn't do that great of a job. We'll see if I do a better job on this next one. So here I'm going to go straight across, and I'm going to start here, and I'm going to pull down, straight across, pull down, straight across. I forgot this one. And then I can just keep going down, and you're sort of making a checkerboard. So pull down, straight across, pull down, straight across, and pull down. So that's another little exercise you can try. You can see that I've got a little extra paint here. If that happens, you can always take a clean brush and just touch it, and it should wick that paint up if you get a little bit extra on your paper. So those are some great things that you can try with any of your brushes, with any techniques, with any mark making that you want to try. The idea is to do it over and over and over again so you get that muscle memory built up. So we've invited Justin today to the studio because he's also a beginner watercolor student, and we had him do the echoing lines exercise, and we thought maybe it would be really great for you to see another beginner go through the exercises. So Justin, what did you think?
Surprisingly harder than I thought.
Okay.
I really haven't had a lot of work with watercolor specifically, and so I think the shift in the medium, I've drawn before, done ink work, and a little bit of work with oils, and it was really interesting to see the way in which both the paint would kind of almost disappear from the brush, in some cases like instantaneously. And then I also had issues with not so much here, but obviously here, accidental bleed.
Okay.
And so
you felt like you didn't have a lot of control with the color. Okay.
It was surprisingly uncontrolled.
Okay.
From what I thought I was doing with the brush versus what came out on the page.
Yes. And watercolor is different than other water mediums or even oil paints. It's very different. It does fall off the brush differently. It reacts differently on the paper. But really, it's all about practice. Okay, so so here you used a round brush, and then here you used a flat brush? Okay.
Yeah, and so I tried to kind of do the, drag it along, twist it a little bit, try to get some different movements of the brush through the line, but I could never replicate the tail consistently.
The end.
Yeah.
I think you did pretty darn good. But maybe try a smaller area. Okay.
Oh yeah.
It's a little bit of a smaller area, and maybe did you turn your paper at all?
No.
See, turning your paper is really helpful for me. So if I were doing this and I was trying to push and pull on this line, it would be hard for me. I would turn my paper and like pull it toward me. So that might help you.
Yeah.
You're absolutely free to turn your paper whenever you want. It's not like you have a canvas on an easel.
Now that you say it, I feel.
Watercolor, it's cool that way because it's difficult if you have a canvas on an easel, but with watercolor, you've just got paper here.
Yeah.
Turn it around if it doesn't feel, natural to you. So that might help you quite a bit.
And then the other thing I noticed, and only when I came back to see it once it was dry, compared to yours, is I have these really harsh lines on the outside of a good majority of my brush strokes.
Right.
And I noticed yours really don't have that, and what the difference was in terms of like if that's a pressure or I was loading the brush with too much paint.
You might have a little too much paint because I see some backgrounds and blooms here, which usually means too much water settling there and it pushes back into the other paint that you already put down. Another thing though is my color here was pretty weak. It's very soft.
Yeah.
And yours, you have a much higher concentration of pigment here, so it's going to look a little bit harder at the edge.
Yeah.
You could soften those edges if you were really painting something.
Yeah.
You can always soften an edge. But yes, it does have to do with pressure and amount of pigment. If I'm pulling my brush, okay, and I'm pushing down, and my brush is really, really, really wet with color, the paint's going to push off the side, and it's going to leave a hard edge. Okay, so just load your brush with pigment, okay, and then sort of dab it on your cloth or your paper towels and then use it. Sometimes when you're just putting a big wash on, you don't need to do that. But for something where you're making an actual mark on paper, I would always load my brush and then roll it on a paper towel and then begin. Well, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys will also try this echoing lines exercise. Please take photos of your work. If you have any questions, just share them to the group, and I would love to answer any of your questions. So as a little extra tip and technique about using brush strokes, we're going to kind of build on that exercise of doing echoing lines, and we're going to make kind of ripples in water or waves. So this is a great way, let's say you're painting a pond and the pond has some wind ripples on it and you want to make that kind of random water pattern and you don't even know where to begin. Keep it random, and this is a great way to do it. Water is random, so we don't need to like perfectly draw every single ripple that we see. We can do something like this. So with a flat brush that is full of water, I'm going to start at the top, and the farther away those ripples are from me, the smaller they will look, and as they come forward toward me, the bigger they're going to look. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I'm working here. So I'm going to start with my flat brush at the horizon line and sort of make a little straight line and then kind of go back and forth. And then I can start back up here, skip a little bit, and fill in. So do you see how I'm kind of echoing what goes before me? But every now and then, I'm putting a little curve in it. And then as I come down the paper, I'm going to start getting a little bigger with those. It's really random. And it's kind of quick and fun. So this is something you can practice as well. And just by using these little random kind of back and forth strokes where if I've made a curve on the next one down, I'm going to kind of follow that curve, breaking it at different places on the page and just following it down from thin to thick, you can get a pretty realistic water ripple effect. So we've learned lots of great techniques for both our round brushes and our flat brushes. I hope you will really take it seriously to practice. Nothing makes us better faster than doing practice, doing things over and over and over again. Think of like a musician practicing their skills. That's what these exercises do for us as well. Next up, we're going to talk about washes.